Hello and welcome to second session of antiplatelet drugs. In last class we studied about the mechanism of hemostasis and we did classified antiplatelet drugs. So what was the classification? Let us again revise that. So I divided into five different categories. So first one is cyclooxygenase inhibitors. The main drug or the most important drug in this is aspirin. In phosphodiesterase inhibitor, we had two drugs, dipyridamole and cilostazol. Then we have GP2B3A inhibitors. Again, the drugs are epsiximab, eptifibatide, and tirofiban. In ADP antagonist, that is ADP receptor antagonist, also called as P2Y12, P2Y12 receptor antagonist, P2Y12 receptor antagonist. Like it comes in two flavors. One is reversible and irreversible. In reversible, we have cangrelor and ticagrelor, and in irreversible, we have clopidogrel, prasugrel, and ticlopidine. And these are the newer forms of the antiplatelet agents. Those are called as PAR antagonists. PAR stands for protease activated receptor. Okay, so PAR antagonist, like the PAR is a receptor for thrombin, like vorapexor and atopaxor. If I want to select most commonly used antiplatelet agent among all of these, what will be that? It will be aspirin. In low dose, aspirin is the most commonly prescribed antiplatelet agent. Apart from aspirin, the second most commonest will be clopidogrel. So ADP receptor antagonist, aspirin, usually they are given in combination. Okay, so this is important. And if I want to ask you which is having the most potent anti-platelet effect among all these, again that will be GP2B3A receptor blocker. Why? That we will see. Actually, GP2B3A receptor was involved in a common pathway for platelet aggregation. Okay, so it is involved in the common pathway for platelet aggregation. So if we inhibit this receptor, it will have maximum antiplatelet effect. Again, if I ask you which will have maximum bleeding tendency among all, again which is the most potent, that is GP2B3A receptor blockers will have maximum bleeding chance among all of these. Okay, let us see all of these agents one by one. So starting with aspirin. Aspirin we have already studied during NSAI chapter. There we studied about its mechanism of action and everything regarding its adverse effect profile, uses, everything. So here aspirin as antiplatelet drug. What will be the mechanism of action of aspirin as antiplatelet agent? So before starting this, let us make a rough diagram of a blood vessel. Suppose this is a blood vessel. Now it will have this is vascular endothelium. Okay, and it has this is endothelial cells, and this endothelial cells contains nucleus. This is very important. And in this blood vessel there are platelets, which are anucleated structures. Now vascular endothelial cells, by the action of enzyme cyclooxygenase, especially COX-1, will synthesize one prostaglandin, that is prostacyclin or PGI2. I already told you in last class what is the role of PGI2. It will increase platelet aggregation or decrease? It will decrease platelet aggregation. By stimulating adenyl cyclase, it will increase the levels of cyclic AMP in the platelet. Thereby, it will try to stabilize the platelet granules and also GP2B3A receptor, thereby acting as an anti-aggregatory substance. While this platelet, COX will synthesize thromboxane A2, which is a potent vasoconstrictor and it increases platelet aggregation. Now giving low dose of aspirin, what it does, what is the mechanism of action of aspirin? It irreversibly it irreversibly acetylates the serine residue of which is present in the active site of cyclooxygenase. Aspirin irreversibly acetylates the serine serine residue which is present in the active site of cyclooxygenase. So it is the only NSAID which acts irreversibly, okay, which will inhibit cyclooxygenase irreversibly. Thereby, it will decrease the levels of thromboxane A2 by inhibiting the COX enzyme in platelets. And giving low dose of aspirin, if we expose blood vessels or platelets to low dose of aspirin, we can see that this platelet COX is much more sensitive to low dose of aspirin than this COX present in vascular endothelium. So overall, there will be more inhibition of the synthesis of thromboxane A2 as compared to prostacyclins. Okay, and also we can see that after few days of initiation of aspirin, as the vascular endothelium has nucleus, it will be, and we know that proteins are synthesized in nucleus. After few days, this vascular endothelial cells will be able to synthesize cyclooxygenase. Thereby, there will be synthesis of prostacyclin. So, but in case of platelets, as they are anucleated structures, so there won't be any synthesis of thromboxane A2 till this action will persist till the life of that platelet, that is 7 to 10 days. This platelet thromboxane A2 synthesis will decline or will not restart unless new platelets are formed and they are coming into the circulation with fresh COX. But as this finally what I mean to say, that after giving aspirin, the ratio of prostacyclin is to thromboxane A2 will increase. That is, the levels of prostacyclin will be much more than thromboxane A2, leading to net effect will be anti-aggregation, and by this mechanism we can say that aspirin can act as an antiplatelet agent. The only criteria which is important is the dose. Only at low dose aspirin acts as antiplatelet agent. What is the dose? That the dose is 50 to 325 milligrams per day. Although this is the range, but most effective dose, if I want to select one most effective dose, that will be 75 milligrams of platelet has to be 75 milligrams of aspirin has to be given per day for maximum platelet inhibitory effect. Okay, for its maximum antiplatelet effect, we have to use 75 milligrams per day. Every day we have to give. Why? Because giving aspirin at 75 milligram per day daily will achieve a cumulative effect on the platelet aggregation. Okay, so that will produce cumulative effect. So one more important thing, that this platelet inhibition is for the life of the platelet, that is around 10 days. So suppose a patient needs to undergo for a surgery, so there you have to stop giving aspirin for at least 7 to 10 days for its effect to wean off. Why? Because we know that it is producing antiplatelet effect. So one of the major side effects of aspirin as antiplatelet drug will be bleeding. So if a patient is about to undergo a major surgery, you have to stop giving aspirin for 7 to 10 days to prevent the risk of hemorrhage. So this is important. Now again we are just revising the antiplatelet effect of aspirin. This is very important. Low dose of aspirin shows this effect. So normally there is a balance between thromboxane A2 and prostacyclins that we know, and I already told you low dose of aspirin if we give low dose of aspirin, the platelet cox is much more sensitive than endothelial cox. So inhibition of platelet cox will be much more than endothelial cox, thereby leading to lower levels of thromboxane A2. And we know that platelets are anucleated structure, so they cannot regenerate fresh cox, while vascular endothelium contains the nucleus, so it will be able to synthesize cyclooxygenase, and thus prostacyclin will also be synthesized. So net effect will be the levels of prostacyclin will increase while levels of thromboxane A2 will decrease, thereby having anti-platelet effect. Okay. But I already told you that dose is very important. Only at low dose this effect is predominant, while at high dose the antiplatelet effect of aspirin is lost. Why? Because this sensitivity is lost. That is, at high dose both thromboxane A2 and prostacyclin synthesis are inhibited, due to which the aspirin's antiplatelet effect will be lost. So dose, maintaining the dose is very important. Okay, now this diagram shows same thing, that is aspirin irreversibly inhibits the platelet cyclooxygenase. We know this pathway, this is very important, from membrane phospholipid under the influence of enzyme phospholipase A, phospholipase A2, arachidonic acid is formed, and under the influence of cyclooxygenase enzyme COX1, prostaglandin H2 is synthesized, and in platelets this is again converted into thromboxane A2. So by inhibiting this cyclooxygenase 1 by aspirin, we are decreasing the synthesis of thromboxane A2. Now regarding pharmacokinetics of aspirin, we know that aspirin is also called as ASA, aminosalicylic acid, acetyl salicylic acid, So it is a weakly acidic drug, and we know that weakly acidic drug, if exposed to acidic medium, which fraction will be more? Then there will be more of non-ionized fraction of drug, and non-ionized fraction of drug is what? Lipid soluble. Okay, so lipid soluble, so it will be readily absorbed. So acetyl salicylic acid is rapidly absorbed from the stomach. Okay, because stomach contains acidic environment. So this is important. Again, last point here, whenever there is aspirin overdose, we can alkalinize the urine by giving sodium bicarbonate, thereby we are increasing the pH. NaCO3 we are giving, so this will increase the pH of urine, where this weakly acidic drug, that is acetyl salicylic acid, will transform into, will have more of, will undergo ionization, due to which we know that ionized fraction of the drug is water soluble. So this water soluble ionized fraction of aspirin will aid in its renal clearance. Okay, renal excretion of aspirin will increase in presence of sodium bicarbonate. So alkalinization of urine can be used in the treatment of aspirin overdose. This is important. Now what are the clinical uses of low dose of aspirin? See, this is basically given for secondary prophylaxis of myocardial infarction. It means that it will prevent reinfarction in a patient of myocardial infarction. If we use low dose of aspirin, it will prevent reinfarction. Okay, so this is called a secondary prophylaxis of MI. Also, we can use low dose of aspirin in prophylaxis of arrhythmias, especially atrial arrhythmias. Why? In atrial arrhythmias, there is ineffective contraction of the atria, leading to blood stasis and formation of thrombus or a embolus. So to prevent that, we can use low dose of aspirin. Okay, because if that embolus will go can go into systemic circulation and can produce stroke. So there also we can use low dose of aspirin. Okay, and in transient ischemic attack, again here also we can use low dose of aspirin for the prophylaxis of TIA evolving to stroke. This is important again. So these three indications are very important, and these are the FDA approved indication. Last one, that is the colon cancer. In some recent studies, low dose of aspirin is associated with decreased incidence of colon cancer. So this is also important, but you have to remember these three indications. Okay, now coming to the adverse effects and drug interaction. Usually the adverse effect which we saw in NSAID, when we were studying about NSAIDs, there, that is much less here, as we are using very low dose of aspirin. So there is usually gastric upset due to this low dose of aspirin, while hepatotoxicity, duodenal ulcer, gastric ulcers, rashes and GI bleeds are very rare. But one thing is there, that aspirin increases bleeding time, so it is contraindicated in patients who are suffering from bleeding disorders like hemophilia. Now one important drug interaction you have to understand, there is a drug interaction between aspirin and ibuprofen. Why? What is that drug interaction? See, ibuprofen is also a NSAID which irreversibly inhibits the enzyme cyclooxygenase 1. Okay, COX-1 is irreversibly inhibited, and they also binds, so irreversibly inhibited, so they also binds to serine residue of COX-1. So suppose we are giving aspirin and ibuprofen together, as ibuprofen is already sitting on the serine residue, that is active site, aspirin will not be able to bind to its site of action. Why? Because there will be competitive inhibition. In fact, there will be a, you can say, ibuprofen will interfere with the action of aspirin, with the antiplatelet action of aspirin. This is important. So whenever you are prescribing ibuprofen or aspirin plus ibuprofen, there should be some gap. It is said that there should be at least 1 hour of gap before the use of aspirin, or at least 8 hours of gap after the use of ibuprofen. If you want to give aspirin after ibuprofen, there should be at least a gap of 8 hours. This is very important. So this drug interaction I've already told you. Now coming to one more agent, that is dipyridamole. Dipyridamole is a inhibitor of phosphodiesterase enzyme. Phosphodiesterase enzyme was involved in the breakdown of cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP was broken down by phosphodiesterase. So if we inhibit this enzyme, this enzyme cyclic AMP is broken down by phosphodiesterase. So if we inhibit this enzyme, there will be increased levels of cyclic AMP inside the platelets that will try to stabilize this platelet granules, so that the contents of platelet granules are not released into the circulation, and also it will stabilize GP2B3A receptor. So in this way, dipyridamole will act as an antiplatelet agent, and also it will block the uptake of adenosine, so the levels of adenosine will increase, and adenosine also has some antiplatelet activity and also causes some vasodilatation. But important is, it has antiplatelet activity. So by these two mechanisms, dipyridamole will cause its effect. It will act as antiplatelet agent. Now one more thing here, that is Dipyridamole is associated with one phenomenon which we will be discussing in angina chapter, that is, it is associated with coronary steal phenomenon. Due to its vasodilatory effect, it is associated with coronary steal phenomenon, as it will cause more of vasodilatation of ischemic versus non-ischemic area. Means in non-ischemic area there will be more vasodilatation and all of the blood will be shifted from non-ischemic area to ischemic area, leading to worsening of anginal symptoms. We will study this in detail in angina chapter, but dipyridamole is a drug associated with coronary steal phenomenon. This you have to know. So what is the indication of dipyridamole? It is given in combination with warfarin to inhibit the embolization from a prosthetic heart valves. So in prosthetic heart valves, it inhibits the embolization. So there you have to use in combination with warfarin. One more drug is there, cilostazol. It also has same mechanism of action as that of phosphodiesterase inhibitor like dipyridamole. That is also inhibiting phosphodiesterase 3, leading to increased levels of cyclic AMP and causing vasodilatation. Cilostazol is a drug that is used in peripheral vascular disease in intermittent claudication. Intermittent claudication is a symptom of peripheral vascular disease. What happens in intermittent claudication is there is episodic, as the name suggests, intermittent, episodic muscle cramps which are relieved by rest. So in that case, and that is mainly due to the atherosclerosis and ischemia, limb ischemia, due to which there is intermittent claudication, and in that we can use cilostazol. Cilostazol is a drug which also acts by the same mechanism. So these two drugs are important. Now coming to another group of agents which are blocking the ADP receptors, especially P2Y12. So P2Y12 receptors are blocked by ADP receptor blockers like clopidogrel, ticlopidine. These are the irreversible inhibitors, and in reversible inhibitors we have cangrelor and ticagrelor. So we will see that. So by blocking the ADP receptors, we are inhibiting the ADP mediated platelet activation and aggregation. Both are inhibited by ADP receptor blockers. So first drug in this is ticlopidine. Ticlopidine is a thienopyridine and it is a product, so it needs to be converted to its active form that inhibits P2Y12 receptor, that we know it is a receptor for ADP. So it has a lag phase of at least 8 to 11 days. It means that maximum inhibition of platelet aggregation will start only after 10 to 11 days of initiation of therapy. Okay, so this is ticlopidine is given by a loading dose and maintenance dose. This is also important. So this is not preferred over clopidogrel. Why? Because there is one serious side effect. Serious side effect is neutropenia. Okay, neutropenia is associated with ticlopidine. So what you have to do? You have to frequently monitor the patient by doing CBC, complete blood count. It is said that it should be done in every 2 weeks for at least first 3 months of therapy. Okay, so this is the most severe side effect. In fact, the patient can land into thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, and also aplastic anemia. These are the rare side effects but serious side effects, so you have to monitor the patient, as I said. Now coming to second most important drug after aspirin is clopidogrel. I already told you. So it also belongs to the same thienopyridine class, and it is a prodrug. So it needs to get converted into its active form by one enzyme, that is 2C19. 2C19 is the important enzyme which converts clopidogrel into its active form. Inside the liver, this cytochrome P2C19 is present, where it will activate clopidogrel into its active form. So what is the significance? That this enzyme undergoes polymorphism. Polymorphism. What do you mean by that? Some peoples will have lower levels of CYP2C19 enzyme, thereby leading to less activation of clopidogrel and less antiplatelet effects of clopidogrel. Okay, so FDA has said that before the initiation of clopidogrel, there should be genetic testing of CYP2C19 levels. So if the patient is poor responder, poor metabolizer of clopidogrel, they are having low levels of CYP2C19, in those patients we will be avoiding clopidogrel. Okay, because CVS mortality will be more, because CVS complication can be there, as antiplatelet effect will not be produced by clopidogrel. So again, it is a irreversible inhibitor of P2Y12 receptor. It has more potent and more favorable toxicity profile. So its safety is much better than ticlopidine. So it is preferred over ticlopidine because it rarely causes that thrombocytopenia. So what are the indications of clopidogrel? So more or less the indications are same as that of aspirin, to reduce the rate of stroke in TIA patients. Also it can be used as secondary prophylaxis in myocardial infarction. Okay, so and also it can be used in peripheral arterial disease. So these are important indications of clopidogrel. So I was telling you about its activation. The enzyme involves CYP2C19. So one more important clinical significance of this enzyme is that there are some enzyme inhibitors, especially the proton pump inhibitors. Proton pump inhibitors like pantoprazole and soprazole and omeprazole can inhibit this enzyme, thereby again leading to its decreased activation and decreased antiplatelet effect of clopidogrel. So there can be drug interaction here also. Aspirin was also showing some drug interaction with ibuprofen, and clopidogrel also shows drug interaction with different proton pump inhibitors due to the inhibition of cytochrome P279 enzyme. So this is important. Now coming to prasugrel, it is a newer drug, comparatively newer drug. So it has better inhibition of ADP receptor, better inhibition of ADP receptor, that is more predictable. So here you need not to go for the genetic testing of CYP2C19, although it is also a prodrug, but as it is a predictable inhibition of ADP receptor, so we should not go for genetic testing of CYP2C19 levels. So in recent studies, it has shown that the incidence of stent thrombosis, cardiovascular death, and myocardial infarction and stroke is less as compared to clopidogrel. But problem with prasugrel is there is higher chances of life-threatening bleeding. So this you have to keep in mind, because it is associated more of life-threatening bleeding. So we will be prescribing more this clopidogrel than prasugrel. Ticagrelor, again it is a reversible inhibitor of ADP receptor, which is a orally active drug. Okay, and indications are more or less same as that of clopidogrel. One important thing, this is given orally. Recently, Cangrelor has been approved, which is available in intravenous form, and again it is a reversible P2Y12 antagonist. So this finishes ADP receptor blockers. Now we will be going to GP2B3A receptor blockers. So GP2B3A receptor is a receptor for fibrinogen and von Willebrand factor. So if we inhibit this receptor, obviously we can inhibit, fibrinogen was involved in platelet aggregation. So we can inhibit platelet aggregation and also to some extent platelet adhesion. As von Willebrand factor, it is a receptor for von Willebrand factor. So by inhibiting this, we can inhibit platelet adhesion. So there are three drugs: Efiximab, Eftifibatide, and Tirofiban. Just you have to know something the names of the drugs, because these are not, nowadays these are not preferred much, because we have better drugs available like ADP receptor blockers, which we will be preferring over these. Why? Because they can produce life threatening bleeding. Okay, so hemorrhage can be there in GP2B3A receptor blockers. So just contrasting the characteristics of different agents, we can see Efiximab has longer half-life as compared to all of these three, and there is no renal clearance of Efiximab. So what is the clinical significance? That if the patient has renal dysfunction, we can, which drug we will be preferring here among all these three? Efiximab. Okay, so this is important. And also Eftifibatide is obtained from venom of a rattlesnake. That is important for your MCQ purpose. Okay, so individually, yeah, this is the mechanism of action, that GP2B, this is GP2B3A receptor, and this is a fibrinogen molecule. So what these drugs are doing, they are just going and sitting on this receptor, they are blocking the access of fibrinogen, thereby preventing platelet aggregation. This was the most important step in platelet aggregation. In fact, it was the common pathway for platelet aggregation. Okay, so this is being blocked. Again, Efiximab, we know that it is a humanized monoclonal antibody directed against GP2B3A receptor, and it will inhibit platelet aggregation more than platelet adhesion. And yeah, this is important, that one of the indication is patients who are undergoing percutaneous angioplasty for coronary thrombosis. In MI, if the patient is going for PCI, there we can use Efiximab. And also in CABG patients, we are using this. Why? Because giving Efiximab to a CBG patient, CABG stands for coronary artery bypass graft, there it will maintain the patency of the blood vessels. Okay, for that indication, for that we can use Efiximab. So again, major side effect will be bleeding. Okay, because it is the antiplatelet agent which is having maximum antiplatelet effect, so risk of bleeding will be maximum. Eftifibatide and Tirofiban, again GP2B3 receptor blockers. One thing you can do for memorizing the name of the drug is that they are binding to the GP2B3A receptor, okay, which was involved in fibrinogen binding. So fibrinogen, FIB. So FIB, you can correlate like that. Okay, so Eftifibatide and Tirofiban contains FIB term, so it is a blocker of fibrinogen binding site. Okay, so the adverse effects, majority of side effect will be bleeding, and it can cause thrombocytopenia. So this finishes the drugs acting as antiplatelet agents. So what I will do, we will stop here again, and I am leaving two questions for you, which you will be solving and giving the answers to me in the group. Okay, so this finishes antiplatelet agents. Thank you.